I want to ask all three of you this question, and we'll start with Renie. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like to you? Renie, we'll start with you.
Great, thanks. You know, it looks like when you're sitting around the table, it is voices from all ages, from all different backgrounds, from all races. And so getting an opinion, I mean, frankly, this is great. As we look at the panel we have today, we've got some diversity here, but it's an inclusion of ideas, an inclusion of voices, but it's also making sure that we're supporting each other and encouraging each other. You know, empathy and compassion are two things that people don't really talk about in the workplace, but it's important, especially now during the time where we're working from home and trying to get football back, that we are encouraging and we're thoughtful to all of our colleagues. And when we think about that diversity side of it, it is so important. I mean, I love working with TOB. She's got a different perspective than I do. We're both women. We both work at the NFL, but she's a Black woman and I'm a white woman, and we come from different perspectives, which gives us some really great strength around the table. And I'm always so honored to sit and talk with her about different areas of things, from race, from being a woman in the workplace, to traditional football on the field. And she's a Titans fan too, which actually she's quite passionate about the Titans as well. So I think that it's something that it gives a voice to everyone, and as a balance as we all try to move forward and be productive in our jobs.
Yeah, and I would say for diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is exactly what that is. It's different voices, it's different ethnicities, it's different backgrounds, you know, socioeconomic. I mean, it's just a full breadth of what that is. The equity piece is ensuring that everybody has an equal playing field, that everybody is afforded the same opportunity to try and achieve. And then the inclusion part is ensuring that, you know, everybody has a seat at the table. And so I think those three pillars are what the NFL is absolutely striving to move toward, and be stronger. And as Renie just said, with everything that's happened over these last few months coming out of the pandemic and then the social unrest, it has really shown that when you bring different voices together and bring people's perspectives and ideas and opinions, it opens up a conversation and it allows for people to understand where people are coming from and to see a different perspective. And so I think, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion are paramount in anything and everything that people do in their daily lives, but especially here in the sports industry.
When I think of diversity, I'm a New Yorker. I think of, who do I see when I get on the subway? You see people from every walk of life, from every race, every religion, every political realm. And the way good ideas happen is when people share good ideas. The best ideas come when people share their ideas, and suddenly, oh my God, I didn't think about that. What a great idea. Or, you know what? I never thought about that. That's not how I grew up. But you know what? You're absolutely right. I think that's when the best ideas happen.
Nancy, I'm curious, when you think about women mentoring women, and you've seen a lot of that, you've done a lot of it as well, of course. Where does that make its biggest mark, in your opinion? And do you have an example of it, perhaps?
Let me think. Well, I will say this. I believe that I believe it's important for women to support and hire women. Why do I say that? Yes, I've known lots of qualified young men, but I remember coming up myself. And if it were me and three guys up for a job, there was likely the guy was going to get the job. I believe part of my role as a woman in this industry is to help young women. Now, it doesn't always mean I get to hire them, but what it does mean is that I always make sure to address young women who work around the office. Come talk to me. Tell me how you're doing. What's your life about? How can you balance a work life in sports and life at home? It is not easy. Too many times in my career, I was told, you know, you should be at home cooking dinner, or, you know, you won't have time to have a baby. I want to make sure that young women today know they can do all of that and more. And it's important. And I try to make sure to help out as many young women as I can.
Traci, I think that Nancy makes an important point, not quote unquote just about advocating for women, but being kind and being interested in young women and what their dreams are. And I'm just wondering, where you think all of that fits in your responsibility in an executive position in the NFL.
I think it should be part of the job description that as a senior executive, if there is an opportunity for you to have an open door and allow young women and men to be able to come in and just talk to you about, what their ambitions are, what their goals, what their vision, how did, I get to the position that I was in, and how, does that help them? I will say that since I've been here at the league, I have a pretty open door policy. I mean, I've got folks, young ladies coming in and out, coming just, to ask my opinion on things. We work together. People that aren't even working on my team, we, have opportunities to engage. And what I like is that they see me as somebody that is approachable. They see me as somebody that's had different experiences. And as I've mentioned earlier, I'm not one to not ask a question or not hold my tongue. So, they come for candid conversation. And I think it's important that as an executive that you allow the younger junior staff the access and the opportunity to talk to you. So I've got a very open door policy.
What's interesting is when Nancy said something, and that, I get asked a lot, like, how do you balance it all? Like, you're a mom, you've got kids, and like, I don't, you can't have it all, right? And someone said that to me once. And I'm like, I don't want it all. I mean, I don't garden and I don't work out really that often, because it's like, what are you willing to sacrifice? It's interesting for me. I get asked that so much about how do you balance your life? How do you, you're a working mom. I don't think my male colleagues ever get asked, how's it like balancing being a dad? And it's interesting for me because when I do think about that, you know what? It is hard. It's hard being a mom, especially now during quarantine and COVID with younger children. And it's hard to be a dad during that time too. But I think as we think about how we mentor young women, it's also to have that encouragement of confidence that, yes, you're going to have to do a whole lot, and you're probably going to have to balance a whole lot. But man, you can kill it every day at your job if you're the best. And be able to kill it here at the National Football League is awesome.
Nancy, I'm curious. You've seen so much, as all of you have, but Nancy, you've seen so much in this profession. And as we look at the Washington football team and those allegations, how have you dealt with whether it's unwanted advancements or women who ask you about dealing with unwanted advancements? How have you handled that over the years?
Interestingly enough, didn't happen a lot to me. I did not encounter that as a producer around the National Football League. I did, as a producer in a job, I would say unwanted advances. If they're unwanted, you speak up. If you're a young woman, then you find somebody who you trust to talk to. But I will also say that having spent a lot of time on the road with Pam Oliver, I cannot tell you how many players would ask me for her phone number. And if it inappropriate, you try to slough it off as a joke, and it's silly, and you move on. I was very lucky. I did not face that as a producer. Most of the time, I was the girl in the back of the room. So I guess in that respect, I was lucky. But I have been, as a producer in other places, from colleagues, and it's not easy. It's not fun. I was Me Too'd before Me Too was ever a hashtag. But you speak up, and you hope that there are people that you can trust when you speak up to them. But never stay quiet, because that is not good for you.
Yeah. My first experience with that, I was working as an intern in the state legislature, and the member that I worked for was, had a reputation of having interns, and I wasn't from his home city, and then they decided that I was selected because of how I looked. And I remember his secretary just said, well, if he asks you out to lunch, you go to lunch, and And so I was like, okay. And then I was like, wait a minute, actually, well, my dad didn't raise me this way, and my mom didn't raise me this way. So I spoke up, and I was like, you know what, I'm not that intern like maybe some of your previous interns. And he respected that. And it actually shocked me, but he respected that. And then, over the years, we've stayed in touch. He's, given me counsel on jobs and how to move up the corporate ladder. So it's really interesting that when you speak up, if that person is not as aggressive or as abusive as some of the things that we've seen, there's an opportunity to stop that and teach them how to be a better person. So that experience started early in my career, but to the point about speaking for other people, I've had people that have come to me to talk about things, and I've helped them go forward and confront and talk to HR and the like to ensure that that they were being treated fairly and that nothing else was happening. So it's definitely happened throughout my career. But my first instance was my first job out of school as an intern.
I think so many people, especially women, have very different experiences along the way, like Traci said. And, similar to her, I definitely have had them. And especially when I first started, I was an assistant. When I first started my job, almost 22 years ago, to getting to this point today. And I know that not everyone is able to speak up. I really am not interested in participating in anything where I feel disrespected. But not everyone's like that. And it's really important that you do speak up. You do either, if you have a voice to speak up for yourself, that's important. Or you go and you find help for someone that can speak for you. Because it is something that feels, if it's either a colleague, if it's someone that you work with in your building, if it's a partner from the outside, I feel like it's come a long way. I've talked to so many women, especially over the last couple of weeks, about their experiences, either verbal experiences or someone actually putting their hand on someone's body in a way that's inappropriate. It's shocking. Some of the stories that you hear are shocking. But it happens, and it's completely unacceptable. And it's one of those where we have to stick up and stand up for one another, but we also have to make sure that we're keeping an eye out and keeping everyone accountable for their actions. As I mentioned, I've had some great bosses in the past that are men that have completely protected me and championed my career, and I'm so thankful for those guys. But I've also worked with people that didn't so much. And didn't respect me in a way. And that's something that I want to make sure that the team that I manage and the women at the National Football League, they don't experience that. And so if there are things that I or Nancy or Traci or all of the other leaders at the NFL can do to help our women at the NFL and those out in the sports industry, we absolutely want to do that.
I want to ask all three of you this question, and Renie, we'll start with you. How would you describe the efforts the NFL is making? And we know the NFL can lead in a very broad scale in this country. The efforts the NFL is making in terms of diversity and emphasizing the importance and really the beauty of it.
Well, and Traci spoke so beautifully earlier on diversity and equity and inclusion within the efforts here. And I think you're going to see a lot of this play out this season as we really work to focus on our support around Black Lives Matter, our support around our social justice efforts, our support as we work and really look internally at our key leaders and at our employees, and making sure that not only are we hiring in a diverse way, but we're helping grow young, diverse people in the roles that they have a desire to work in. And so I think you're going to see a lot of efforts there continue. And especially even on the field, where women also not just have a place in the boardroom, but also on the field within coaching and scouting positions, and within our clubs as well. And this has a trickle down effect. I think the good news about hiring women that are experienced, we're awesome at our jobs. Some of us are the best at our jobs than anybody else on the planet. And so because we're so competitive, and we all like to win here, I don't see why that would stop at all. And frankly, you might see more of it because of that.
And then just again, the diversity and what the league is committed to doing. I think one of the other areas, we talked about, where the commissioner and our football operations team is looking toward increasing diversity on the field and in the coaching staff. They're doing so internally as well. We've got affinity groups, so we've got the Black Engagement Network, we've got the Pride group. So we've got Liga, which is our Latinx affinity group. So we've got all of these affinity groups where people can join and be a part of something and learn about different cultures and different points of diversity. But then just throughout all of the programming and what we're doing in youth football, when we look at football operations, there are all of these coaching clinics and all of these affiliations with historically Black colleges and universities, and just trying to engage, more diverse fans, recruiting the next wave of football players. So there's, diversity is a part of everything that we're doing. And then on our social responsibility side, just as Renie mentioned, what you'll see at the start of this season will, filter throughout the entire season, but our impact on social justice and our impact on work that's affecting communities of color. But these are going to be through the voices of the players, through our clubs, and through our grant partners. And so you'll see a lot of focus on diversity, and we're really excited but it's part of the fabric of the league.
I think it's important to listen to the players. I think we were a little late to the party. I've been around the league 14 years, and 2016 was a really interesting season. But the players are such an integral part of who the National Football League is. And these guys care about their communities, and they listen to their stories, listen to what they have to say. We don't all experience what they get to experience, and I think we can learn a lot just by listening.
You're all so fantastic. I wish we could go have lunch sometime. It's just a great conversation and an important one. And I do want to leave you with this. I've been doing my job an awfully long time. And Renie, I happened to notice when you were doing a video for Strong Side, you kind of messed up and you said something like, oh, this is going to be one of those 100 takes kinds of things, needing 100 takes to get it right. I have literally sat in this chair and needed 100 takes to get a 1-minute video right. So I think that we could all admit that stuff is not the easiest thing in the world, but you have a little fun with it.
You're doing
and really
awesome.
The information today has just been terrific.
You're doing awesome, and thank you, Kim, for so much that you do in support of women. It's such a great example for the NFL Network and all the women there in Los Angeles, as well as all of us at the league office in New York and New Jersey, too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. And for the record, this was one take. I'm Kim Jones, and as we continue our roundtable discussions here on NFL Network, today we are focused on women in sports. And I am incredibly pleased to be joined by Renie Anderson, NFL Chief Revenue Officer and Executive Vice President of NFL Partnerships, Traci Otey Blunt, NFL Senior Vice President, Corporate Communications, and Nancy Bernstein, veteran TV sports producer and NFL Senior Director, Integrated Sales. Ladies, thank you for joining me so much for what is an important topic. And Renie, I'd like to start with you because you wrote an op-ed for NFL.com. The headline was, NFL works hard to promote women to leadership roles. Take us inside a little bit of what you want readers to get from that piece.
Thanks so much, Kim. I think the reason I wrote that is that there's such a focus now on women in the workplace, women working in male-dominated roles. And I read a story about the NFL that focused on harassment, and which, by the way, happens and is horrible. Part of the story wasn't right. Part of the story suggested that the NFL doesn't have any senior female leaders. And unfortunately, that's not true, or not unfortunately. Fortunately, we have many senior leaders as females, and there's a lot of work that's been done around that. And so rather than dismiss the women that have worked so hard to get to these positions, I thought it was important that we honor them and we champion them, as well as those women that are on the rise. Because working in sports is awesome. I absolutely love it. But I don't want women to feel like they don't have a place at the table, because they absolutely do.
Traci, how would you describe the importance of having women in those leadership positions as we speak specifically about the NFL?
I think it is very important because women bring a different dynamic and a different perspective to the workforce. We've got our personal experiences that we bring in. We have a different sense of empathy. We look at things, I think, a little more holistically, but with a different and keen eye. And so I think it is really important because those voices triculate down. But on top of that, when you have younger female staffers that are here looking up to you to see that they can accomplish and achieve at the level that you've aspired to, then that is, something that you're helping the next generation of women to understand that they can go to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I would say when I started, I was the only girl in the room, and to see where women in sports are now is really gratifying. I won't say we're there, but we're a lot further along than we were when I started back in 1982. But it is good to see a lot of women working, certainly in the NFL offices. It's important for people to know women know plenty about football, too.
Nancy, I think that we often are asked to talk about our struggles, and that is fair. But I also want to talk about our success. And I'm just wondering, in your role as ESPN producer, how did you find that experience, and how were you able to kind of govern many folks while in a leadership role at that point in your life and at that point in our times?
Well, I remember when I got to ESPN as a producer, I was one of, I think, 2 women who were producing, and there was a lot of men who had been there for years, who had worked their way up the ladder, who were not crazy about me in the position, but were okay. And what I remember most was producing my first 2:30 Sports Center. Nothing like doing a show at 2:30 in the morning. And a coordinating producer who didn't know me very well just sat in the back of the room. And after 30 minutes was over, he looked at me, and the only comment he said, "I guess you've done this before." And I said, "Yeah, I have, but thank you for noticing." But I will say, it still didn't make it easier to maneuver. I would say my struggle led to my success, in that I would stay somewhere and get as much as I could out of a position, but finding it was always difficult to get promoted. So how did I get promoted? I went to go get the next job. And I ultimately landed at NFL Network as a coordinating producer after 11 years at Fox NFL Sunday, which was one of the best experiences I ever had, despite the fact not working with a lot of women. I was very fortunate to work with Pam Oliver for 11 years, who is still one of my good friends today. But yeah, my struggle led to my success, and it led me here. And I hope that there's still lots of runway for all the young women that I do get to virtually see now all the time at the league.
One thing I know to be true of all 3 of you is you have PhDs in hard work. There's no doubt about that in rising to the levels that you have. And Renie, I'm curious, to go from manager level at the league office back in, I believe, 2006 to now an executive position there with many responsibilities. How would you describe, to say, a younger Renie, the path you'd have to go to do that?
I have to tell you, like many, I worked so hard, and I think there's a little bit of like, oh, look, she's got this great job now. It must have been super easy. It was not easy, and it was a lot of hustle and working really hard. And when I talk to a lot of women, oftentimes it's like, you've got to become an expert. You've got to become the best. I don't want a job because I'm a woman. I want a job because I'm the best at it. And I absolutely know I'm going to run circles around everyone else. And so I worked really hard, but I also had some amazing champions in the NFL that were men as well as women. Lisa Baird, who is currently the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, was the CMO when I first started at the NFL. And I had a really nice conversation with her when I started. And she did a very simple thing. She actually put me on a working group. that gave me an opportunity to get to know many people in the league office, as well as get exposure to senior level executives. And that's what's called really championing for women. And although it was a very simple thing she did, she changed my career, and I'm so thankful for that. So if I can do that for other women, I absolutely want to do it. But I think the key is you've got to work really hard and also work really well with all of your colleagues in the building.
Traci, I think we all go through the idea, hey, I wish I knew then what I know now. I'm curious what advice you wish you had been given early in your career, perhaps.
To take on every challenge and don't be afraid. I think a lot of times, women are in sports and in organizations, and we may not be as, not everybody is in the room that looks like us. And so we may not speak up sometimes. We may not have an opinion when we actually do, but we don't want to say it out loud. And so I have grown to become unapologetic. I think I'm hired for the counsel and the expertise that I bring to the table. And so as my younger self, I would tell myself to don't be afraid and make sure that you ask those questions and understand, what the issue is that's being presented to you, and not fear that, someone's going to think, oh, she's not smart because she asked that question, because they're more than likely wondering the same question too.
Nancy, I know you subscribe to the idea of don't be afraid, don't you?
You can't be afraid. If you don't speak up, people won't hear you. Now, many people will say I speak a little too loudly, but I've learned that the only way to get heard is to speak up. But it's also important to know what you're talking about. And I think Renie and Traci just said it. You've got to know. You got to be educated. And unfortunately for women, we got to know more, because we do. But never be afraid to speak up, because if you don't, that is when you fall to the back of the room, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Renie, as someone who has cried on air, not just once, on both radio shows I've done as well as here on NFL Network, I loved in the op-ed when you said the worst piece of career advice you'd ever gotten was not to be so emotional. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that for us.
I mean, here's the thing. I'm passionate. Part of the emotion with me, it's like the best part. It's the best part of me, I think, at times. And I think that, Tina Fey in her book, Bossy Pants, she writes a part about what she says that they always tell women don't cry. And she said the opposite. She said, I say cry, it will terrify everyone. And I have had some moments where I have done everything humanly possible to try to keep the tear in my eye, and it's like you can feel it. It's like the slow motion of the tear coming down, and then it's the tear heard around the world. And in reality, it's not because I'm emotional in a emotional sense. It's because I care. And so
Yes.
If I get to that point, do I want to be a professional? Yes. So I can't cry every day. But if I get to that point, and it does obviously terrify everyone, it's because I care and I'm putting my passion in the right place. So I'm not championing for everybody crying all the time, but I am saying be passionate for what you do. And so some of us, Ken, you and I, we cry when we're passionate. It just happens.
We do. Oh, we do. Yes, absolutely. And sometimes for good reasons, and sometimes out of the emotion of a moment. Maybe you're telling someone else's story, that really hits home,
Yes.
or is incredible of what they've overcome. I truly don't apologize for that. And I don't know that, and I agree with you that we shouldn't.
Nobody wants to cry. Nobody ever wants to cry. It's not like if you get a button you could just turn off. Like, I'm going in this meeting, I'm going to be tough as nails, I'm turning off my cry button. I would absolutely do that every time, but it's just not going to happen.
Traci and Nancy, I can see you laughing and smiling, and you're enjoying this. Nancy, I want to direct this to both of you. We'll start with Nancy. Call me crazy. I honestly think diversity, and I know what diversity means to all of us, but in a way, it's also diverse to have people who are simply different, even if it's emotionally. and in other ways. And you're nodding, Nancy, so I'm going to just let you take it away. You understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely. In my days as a feature producer, there were many times I got to tell really great stories that athletes didn't really want us to tell, because so many times they're worried that we're letting them tell this story so that people think something other of them. But I have sat in the back of a room and bawled my eyes out as a producer, and in my days with Pam, who would sit and turn around and say, "You have got to stop crying." And I say, "I'm trying. I don't know what else to do. This story has really touched me." I think it is. I think it was why Pam and I really got to tell a lot of those kinds of stories together, because that empathy, that emotion, to be told through voices like ours, are different. And I think sometimes tell the story a little bit better.
Yeah, and to that very point, the fact that the story that you're telling brings that emotion, that's what I mean. That means that the story is very compelling. You're giving voice to, to whatever the story is about, but there is nothing wrong with that. I think people need to come unapologetically and need to come as their true authentic self. And if that means, you're feeling emotional and you shed one tear or 30 crocodile tears, you don't need to apologize for that. That's part of your character. That's part of your vulnerability. And I think when people see that and they see the authenticity of a person, that just shows so much more about who you are. And I think in this sport and in this field that we're in, that it is important that we come on unapologetically and come authentically. And again, if that's one tear or a big one, that's so be it. That's who we are. So.
If I may just say this, I don't know how many times in my career that I have been called emotional. And I say today, I wear that badge as a badge of honor. I'm proud to say I'm emotional. It means I care. And I'm okay with that.
Renie, I'm curious, in your time at the NFL, how you've seen the league office grow, how you've seen perhaps Roger Goodell set the tone that he wants to see in the league that he runs.
I've been here almost 15 years, and it has been an evolution of change. And a lot of that change, led by Commissioner Goodell through leadership over the 15 years, really focusing in, again, on diverse leadership here that we have the last couple of years, especially as we look at women and, like Traci, women of color. We're such a view of the world, right? We have 187 million fans. We're America's favorite sport. We have the best athletes on the field, and the country cares what we do. They care what we say. We have this amazing platform. And so I'm just really proud now that we have the ability to stand confidently in support of our players in the initiatives that they care about, from social justice, Black Lives Matter, supporting women's initiatives, awareness for domestic violence, focusing on the growth of and support for our military, focusing on the growth of and support around cancer awareness and, youth football. The list goes on and on. But we have an amazing platform. And I think today, whereas, from 15 years ago, we've come a really long way. And part of that is now we're in partnership with our players, maybe more so than we ever have been before. And I think that because of that, we have a real opportunity to make a real difference. Provide some great entertainment, obviously, but make a real difference in our country.
Traci, I'm curious if, as a woman of color, in these weighty times we live in, do you somehow feel more responsibility to be a leader, to be simply better, to set a tone? Do you feel that?
It's especially now that I think the whole world, because this is global, right? The issue that we're dealing with. Growing up, race has always been, I walk into a room, you're going to know a Black person. So I've always had to deal with race and as I say, hold myself to a higher standard because, we had to work twice as hard for the same recognition. But I think here in the time that we're in now, absolutely, I think, people are watching, my actions, what I do, that's going to reverberate. And I go back to the junior staff again. I have to set, an example, one for myself, for, my family, but then if they're, those that are striving to, come up the corporate ranks or get promoted, that I want to set an example of what that is. But when it comes to race relations, I've always been a voice, part of the community, never backed down, never been, apologizing for being a strong Black woman. I know, we've seen some articles lately of women being referred to in other contexts, and when that happens, and then when that's happened to me, I say, well, I must be doing something right, because if I've drawn that much attention for you to put that much energy into me, then I'm doing something right, and I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to do it better.
Do you feel, Traci, supported completely at the league office?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I tell you, when I started, it was just exciting to be embraced, and it's interesting because one of the first people to come and basically wrap their arms around me and tell me, I've been at the league for a long time, was Renie. Like, she called me in her office and she was like, when I started, I didn't have, that mentorship. And so, she's been here 15 years, and she was like, even if someone just says hello, like, that would make a difference. And so, Renie's been there for me as I've started. And then when other people have started, I do the same thing. But I have always felt embraced. I've felt very welcome. You talked about Commissioner Goodell earlier, and what I appreciate about him is I see what he's doing behind the scenes. A lot of times, only certain things are getting reported. And as part of the media group here, you're trying to get that story out, but there's always different opinions. But I've had the opportunity to see firsthand the commissioner's commitment to diversity and inclusion, commitment to getting more coaches of color hired, commitment to get more people of color hired here in the league and at the club. So I've seen it firsthand. I wouldn't be working here if I didn't believe in his mission and what he's trying to do. And if I can play a small part in that, then I've done my job.